Today I am going to talk about the chapter in Delog that is titled Ulok Code, the Pure Realm of Tara. And this is all Taras, white Tara, green Tara, red Tara, and so forth. There's a total of 21 Taras. So she starts by describing what this pure realm is like, her impression having gotten there. And she says that there's no concept of summer or winter, no even concept of birth, aging, sickness, and death, that it is filled with beauty, natural beauty, rainbow pavilions that are hanging in the air made out of light, and so forth. That beings are born on a lotus. It's a miraculous birth. And that there are ponds of nectar. A lot of this is very similar to the other pure realms that she has visited, the one of Chenrezi's, a pure realm, the Potala. So there are wish-fulfilling trees, ponds of nectar, mountains of precious jewels, and the sound of Dharma fills the air. And it's full of high-level bodhisattvas, both male and female bodhisattvas. And this is typical of pure realms, to have lots and lots of male and female bodhisattvas in them. And again, just kind of a reminder that when we are doing Vajrayana practices like the white Tara that we do, green Tara, Chenrezi, and so forth, that when we finish doing the mantra repetition, we dissolve the visualization, and then we re-arise as the deity. And the instructions are that all form is the body of the deity, all sound is the sound of mantra, the speech of the deity, and that all thought is the mind of the deity. And this is a bit like these pure realms. Again, the sound is the sound of Dharma. The all form is the body of the Dharma, emanation of the body of the Dharma, of the deity, and so on and so forth. That this is congruent with these pure realms. So she comes to the central palace and describes this central palace as having the power to liberate beings in 4 ways. And what that means is that seeing it can cause liberation, hearing it can cause liberation, hearing about it, touching it can cause liberation, and just bringing it to mind, remembering, recalling it can bring liberation. So this is the palace of the Taras. And as she entered it, Dawa Drolma said that she felt the veil of ignorance lifted and her pristine awareness expanded. And she described a surge of love and compassion coming forth from her mind, not coming from outside, but welling up from within. And in the courtyard, And of course, these palaces are vast, and this one she described as being inconceivably vast. And in the courtyard were thousands of goddesses chanting the 21 praises to Tara. And this is the same praises that we do when we do green Tara. So she makes mental offerings, and then she chants the 21 praises along with them. And I can tell you this, that the Tibetans, many of the Tibetans will have these 21 praises memorized. You can tell when you come to doing green Tara with someone that has memorized them, in that they can chant every phrase and every syllable when you are not able to do that. So she chants along with them. And then after that, she continues and she meets a goddess of longevity, the Ayur Deva, Ayur Deva, D-E-V, excuse me, Dave E, D-E-V-I, which means it makes it feminine, Ari Devi. And so she prostrates to her, makes mandala offerings, says the 7-branch prayer. This is Guru Rinpoche's 7-branch prayer, which we do before green Tara, and we do it after we do Amitabha, when we do the Chenrezi Amitabha practice. Frequently, there are additional verses that are included with the 7-branch prayer, but the 7-branch prayer, excuse me, the 7-branch prayer, I was thinking of the 7 line, the Guru Rinpoche supplication, but here the 7-branch prayer, just any 7-branch prayer that has the branches of homage and prostrations, offerings, confession, rejoicing in the merit of others, requesting the wheel of Dharma to be turned, requesting the Buddhas to remain, and then dedicating the merit. These are the 7 branches of any 7-branch prayer, and there are lots of them in Tibetan Buddhism. And as I said, I was thinking of the 7-line supplication to Guru Rinpoche, and got a little sidetracked there. And then she does various aspiration prayers, receives the blessings from this goddess of long life, and then she continues to the central immeasurable mansion. And this is described as, in a very similar way to the Potala Palace of Chenrezi. This is one thing about Vajrayana, is that a lot of these visualizations, palaces, even the deities themselves have much in common, and it's in particular details where there will be a difference. The details could be in color, the hand implements of the deity, the position of the hands of the deity, and so on and so forth. And the same way it is with the mansions. So all of this, of course, is made out of light. And when you get into these more advanced tantric practices, the actual chanting will frequently, if not include a detailed description, at least the commentaries will include a very detailed description of these palaces. So in the center of this palace is Tara. And this is green Tara. This is not white Tara. This is green Tara. And she appears as a 16-year-old woman. Her garments are made out of silk of the gods. And she is adorned with many gems, and she's in lotus posture. She also has ornaments of gold, earrings, and so forth, armlets, wristlet, bracelets, anklets, a crown, and so forth. She holds a lotus flower in her left hand, and in her right hand, it's up in the mudra of giving refuge. And in the text, quote, she shelters beings from the limitless fears of this confused world of cyclic existence. And that is the meaning of having her right hand in the giving refuge mudra. She's giving refuge from suffering, protection from suffering. Now, there is a retinue of female bodhisattvas that are circumambulating her counterclockwise. And quite honestly, I am not certain about why it is done counterclockwise by female bodhisattvas, where ordinarily when we're doing a circumambulation, we're doing it in a clockwise direction. So I can't answer that, at least not with any kind of knowledge, and I don't want to guess. Then she describes the mandala, in other words, the important beings in the four directions of front, to the right, to the rear, and to the left. And these are great masters who have devoted Tara to their main practices. Their main practices are doing various Tara related sadhanas and other things. So in the right is Surya Gupta, then behind is Dawa Gyaltsen, to the left is Chandrogmin, and then Dimpamkara. And then she says hundreds of thousands of forms of Tara. And ordinarily they talk about 21 different forms of Tara, but here it goes beyond these 21 forms. It's just millions and millions and millions of different forms of Tara. And she mentioned some of them. I'm not even going to go through them. I'm just, if you want to know what they are, read that chapter where they are given names and so forth. And she emphasizes that these forms are not flesh and blood, that they are the illusory forms of, she uses the phrase pristine awareness. And this is an important point, that from the viewpoint of an enlightened being, the forms of samsara are like reflections of the moon in water, like the forms we experience in a dream, like a rainbow, and so forth. But also the absolute is experienced in illusory form as well, that made out of light, no solidity, and so forth. So she describes these forms as being like a reflection in water. She emphasizes that ordinary samsaric reality has ceased. And so she experiences, to use a Kagyu term, she experienced luminosity. She's experiencing the primordial purity of mind with nothing to grasp it as ultimately real. She uses the term pristine awareness. So she approaches Tara, makes similar prayers and aspirations as she did when she approached the goddess of longevity. She places Tara's feet on her head for a blessing. And it also, of course, signifies that she feels that the lowest part of Tara, her feet, is above the highest part of her, the top of her head. And this is a sign of respect and devotion. And this actually makes a person more receptive to the blessings that you will receive from that being, whoever it is. So then she sings a spontaneous song to Tara and asks her for various things. She requests various things. First of all, she asks Tara to protect her from her samsaric thought patterns. In this and the following chapter, there's a lot of talk about degenerate times. And so she talks here about degenerate times where the teachings are in decline, like the setting sun, where there is sectarian prejudice, where there are many obstacles to liberation in the form of strong afflictive emotions and karmic patterns. The world being full of evil, charlatans are everywhere. The charlatans, you might say, masquerading as Dharma teachers. The threat of barbarians bringing the end to the teachings. She talks about forces at work that are contrary to happiness and welfare of beings and the flourishing of the Dharma. So Tara then responds, talking about her original aspiration to always be in a woman's body, to always appear until all beings are liberated in the form of a woman. And she says that she can liberate beings if they just recall her name. And she calms fear. And there were 8 fears here that are mentioned in the footnotes. But I want to remind you that we're really talking about fear in general, not just these 8 fears. And so the 8 fears that are mentioned, and this really shows you how this originated in India. So the fears are the fear of lions, fear of wild elephants, the fear of fire, fear of snakes, floods, imprisonment, thieves, and cannibals. And needless to say, there are a lot of other things that we can be afraid of in samsara. She also reminds her that she will never give up work until all sentient beings are liberated, and that she will remain as a bodhisattva. But what that means really is that, and she kind of alludes to this a little bit later, but she is a fully enlightened Buddha, but manifests as a bodhisattva. So then she talks about the degenerations in the world, which pretty much mirrors what Dawa Drolma has said earlier when she requested her blessings. But to go into them a little bit more, the specific 5 degenerations of this time are decrease in lifespan, increasing afflictive emotions, increasing resistance to spiritual teachings, increase in strife and conflict, and finally, an increase in the perversion of spiritual views. And this idea of this being a time of degeneration is not something that came up suddenly in the 20th century, that this goes back much further than that. But if you look at it, it would be easy to conclude that things are worse now than they were 100 years ago, and maybe 100 years ago they were worse than 200 years ago in Tibet. But I'll leave that up to you. She also talks about the threat of barbarian or non-Buddhist invasions, a loss of necessary support of practice, of beings thinking that there are no consequences for negative actions and therefore no reason to avoid negative actions. So she says the remedy to all of this is to pray to Tara, Chenrezig, Guru Rinpoche, and your root guru. For us Kagyus, that would be Karmapa. She says that they are in a state equal to your own primordial wisdom or Buddha nature. But theirs is fully developed and ours needs to be developed. Direct your attention to virtue, avoid distraction. Give heart service, not lip service. Take the teachings into your experience. And this is really important. This it is getting at the fact that a lot of times we may know a lot or think we know a lot, but we really don't put them into practice. Here in the West, there is a saying about practicing what you preach. But this is even deeper than that. It is not only practicing what you preach and the teachings that you have heard, but get them into your heart so that you become inseparable from these teachings, where you follow them without even thinking, where it just becomes part of you. So then the advice is to rely on faith, pure view, compassion, bodhicitta, exertion, wisdom, mindfulness, alertness, and self-control. That's a lot to rely on, but all of these are qualities. And all of these bear fruit. If we're missing one or two or three of those, that we don't really travel the path. And so it's important to keep all of these things in mind as we practice, study, contemplate, and so forth. The self-control, you could also say self-discipline, and it is not punishing yourself. What it is continually being mindful and careful of what your actions are and avoiding doing things that harm yourself or harm other people. And encourage yourself to engage in activity that is beneficial to yourself and other people. And she says then to practice regularly, behave morally, and heed karma. And this is a very important point. In a way, the chapter 2 about reflections in a crystal mirror is all about why you want to heed karma. And these pure realms also are all about why you want to heed karma, because the people that end up in these pure realms do so because of their accumulated merit, as well as these qualities that were just talked about of faith, pure view, compassion, and so forth. And finishes up by saying this is why when you practice these at the time of death, you will be escorted to a pure realm. She says that recite the 21 praises of Tara, and that this can uproot all faults and failings. And it increases our positive qualities and causes rebirth in the realm of bliss. So it is always good to at least recall Tara, say her mantra, and so on and so forth. If you have them memorized, say the 21 praises. At this point, she has run out of time and has to return to her body. And so she says she entered her body and had a, I can't remember the exact word. It was something like an explosive sneeze or a violent sneeze that shook her whole body. And then the people became aware that she was alive again, and everybody was joyful and happy. They had a feast or a sok in the Tibetan language, which would be a chanted ritual that included symbolic food. And so then she rested for a day or two and then had her words written down by a scribe. And she has an ending then to this chapter that it's very common in Tibetan texts to have an ending of some sort after the text itself is done to explain various things. In this case, the reasons and her motivation for writing these things down. And she indicates that Tara embodies all enlightened beings. And this is important. This is the way that it is taught, that there really is no separation of these enlightened beings, that ultimately there is no difference. And that one of Tara's qualities is to dispel the darkness of ignorance. And then she says that she has written this, and it is free of exaggeration or deprecation. It's free of sectarianism, free of jealousy. And that finally, the very fact that she was able to experience these things and then recall this was due to the grace and blessings of her lamas. So now I want to finish up by going into the last chapter, which is Staircase to Liberation. And basically, this is just a summary of the previous chapters. So I'm going to be very brief here. It begins with an homage to Guru Rinpoche, Chenrezig, and Tara. These are the three pure realms that she visited. And so when she visited Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava, that he had this retinue of the king of Tibet and his queen, Yeshe Sogyal, who was Guru Rinpoche's consort, and then the king's ministers and Buddhist masters from that time when Guru Rinpoche was in Tibet. And that this caused her to have tremendous faith in the compassion of the deities and pure realms. And it caused her disillusionment with the six realms, which is the basis of renunciation, of trying to be successful in samsara. From there, Tara escorted her to the Bardo and saw beings going down, being tormented and pulled by demons and minions of Yama. Whereas on the other hand, beings that had a lot of good karma, practiced virtue and so forth, were being guided by dakas and dakinis that were singing and dancing. And for them, a day of happiness had dawned. So her advice is renounce samsara and its pleasures. You can't take it with you. And to prepare now through practice, study, and contemplation for your next life. Life is too precious to squander. Don't let the rest of your life slip away. Then she goes on to discuss how she met Yama, the Lord of Death, in his fortress, the minions, and being judged. And what a terrifying experience it was, seeing beings being dragged away after judgment. And while she's there, then of course Yama focuses his attention on her, and Tara speaks up in her behalf, and the minions do their way of testing to see what kind of karma she has accumulated and what where she should go and so forth. And Yama says that she should take this message back for the living. And the message is, don't forget about your death, and don't forget the dead. Don't forget to dedicate some virtue to them, that it will be beneficial to them. And he says that we can do this while we're alive: gather merit, purify negative karma, which is the effects of harmful actions of body, speech, and mind, and increase our positive qualities. And so in these three categories, to gather merit, practice regularly, like what we do here at this center, and follow the 7 points of mind training when you are going about your daily worldly activities, and so forth. Do things that create merit, and then dedicate them. To purify negative karma, here are prayers that we use here that you could do. There are a lot of them that are mentioned there, and many of them I'm not familiar with, but what we have here at the Hay River Center and the Minneapolis KTC is, and you may have in at home in your own possession, is this Three Skanda Sutra, the Vajrasattva practice from Nundro, the Nyungne practice in general. When we have more Nyungne here, to do what you can to attend one or more. There's a confession in the Nyungne practice that begins on 49. It's a shorter confession than the Three Skanda Sutra, but do that. So there are prayers that you can do for confession, and it's important to purify the effects of our harmful actions rather than just feel there's nothing I can do about it, or there's not much that I can do about it, then just worry about it. And the number 3 here, to increase your positive qualities, practicing the 6 perfections is really good for doing that. Attending teachings, reading, contemplating teachings, and basically take it into your experience. Give it heart service. Become the teachings that you have read and heard and understood. Then they talk about the 3 points of ongoing awareness. And this is what I mentioned earlier, and that is when you re-arise after the mantra repetition, the instructions are that all form is the deity's body, all sound is the speech of the deity, and all thought is the mind of the deity. To try to remind yourself of this from time to time during the day. There's a lot of advice that is given here that is repetitious from the previous chapters, and I'm not going to go into that at this time. He says, don't get entangled with 8 worldly activities. Plant roots of virtue, or you could say seeds of virtue. And that while you're alive is the time to prepare for coming before me, Yama. And he finally tells her, tell people to reflect on these things over and over until certainty arises. And then after that, she has a very long dedication, which is really quite beautiful. I am going to turn to it and just pick out a few things in this long dedication. And this is just more picking out examples than things that are the most important. May the view and conduct of the Sangha that maintains the teachings be pure. I dedicate this virtue to my 2 parents, as well as to enemies, demons, hindrances, and all those connected to me through positive or negative karma, and especially to those men and women who depend on me for their livelihood. The horses that serve us by plowing our fields, the cows that supply us with the distillation of their essence, and those whose flesh and blood and hide we use, all sentient beings whose deaths we have caused directly or indirectly. And I am now going to open this up to questions. The question was, would you repeat those qualities? And here are the ones that I mentioned. Rely on faith, pure view, compassion, bodhicitta, exertion, wisdom, mindfulness. So faith is an element of confidence in the teachings, confidence in the teachers, and confidence in your own Buddha nature or faith in all of these things. Compassion, of course, is wanting all beings to be free of suffering. Bodhicitta has, there are different types. One is relative bodhicitta, which is the aspiration to attain enlightenment so that you can benefit and liberate all sentient beings. And then there is the actual practicing, studying, contemplating, so that you can, it's called implement bodhicitta, so that you can actually develop to the point where you can do these things. A lot of times this type of bodhicitta is misunderstood, and people think that if I just go out and start rescuing abused animals and taking care of them, that that is bodhicitta, but it is this desire to travel along the path, develop your qualities where you can be of much more benefit to beings, to become an actual bodhisattva. And bodhisattvas are bodhisattvas because they have experienced emptiness and have unlocked this limitless reservoir of compassion. Ultimate bodhicitta is the experience of the ultimate of emptiness, which is beyond expression. And then exertion, diligence is another word for that, and it means joyful exertion, feeling good and joyful about what you are doing when you're practicing the Dharma and when you're just going about your daily activities. Joy in being alive, joy in having met the Dharma and being able to practice it. And wisdom, you could say it starts with a common sense. It is, and as we develop it, as we develop the first five paramitas, and exertion is one of them, but it also then blooms into primordial wisdom, which is yeshe. And then mindfulness is just paying attention to whatever it is that you are doing as you go through your daily life and when you're practicing. The question was that these hell realm and being in front of Yama and being judged sounded a lot like the Christian version of hell. And I thought this was absent in Buddhism. Now, earlier in the book, it mentions that to a person that has pure view and does not have all this accumulated negative karma, Yama will appear as the primordial Buddha. In our tradition, this would be Vajradhara. In the Nyingma tradition, and that was the author, Dawa Drolma, was Nyingma, it would be Samantabhadra. But the point is not who Yama is, but how he is perceived. And the perception is based on the karma of the individual. So ultimately, with pure view, it's a pure realm.